Alpha, you ready for this? PSA President Ryan Hoj was on the It's Jeff Wilson show here recently and spilled the tea, as my 11-year-old daughter likes to say. Actually, some really big announcements coming out of PSA that just have to be talked about immediately, so make sure to stick around. It's a doubleheader today, friends. Hope everybody in the hobby family is doing well. Yes, we did have a video this morning. But this is some breaking news that we can't wait. We have got to talk about it. We also will be talking about this on Off-Centered starting at 9 p.m. Eastern with Flipping Steve and Neo for Neo Cards and Comics. Before I get started, huge thanks to today's video sponsor, My Card Post, the first subscription-based selling platform, free to buy, free to sign up and be a buyer, to sell $9 to $22 a month, depending on how many listings you want to have on the site, up to 7,700 members on this thing, and it is a lot of fun. There's a whole feed where you can communicate back and forth. You can buy, sell, trade. So you can offer trade plus cash for this, that. It's like a trade night on a website. So you've got to check it out at My Card Post. I got a link in the video description as well as down below in the pinned comments. All right, so some pretty big implications here from what we saw in this interview.
You take the card and put it in the sleeve. You take the card and put it in the sleeve.
Ryan talks about some of the things that they've been working on, and this interview with Jeff Wilson really kind of pulled behind the curtain a little bit so we could kind of see what is PSA thinking about topics of the day, like card cleaning. We'll get into that a little bit later. The first one I want to talk about, PSA and SGC Collaborations.
SGC was recently acquired by Collectors. From what was said at the time of the acquisition, SGC is going to continue to operate independently from PSA. You guys are your own companies. But I'm sure there has to be some type of collaboration that might occur or working together in some manner. How do you see that playing out?
So Pete and team have been welcomed into the fold. They're doing a great job continuing to run that brand as a separate brand, independent entity. We are collaborating already. The first thing that we started collaborating on was around our brand protection and fraud teams. We are sharing data around counterfeit cards. We're sharing information on bad actors, maybe that are submitting altered cards. That is being shared across the two companies. I think that's an obvious place to collaborate, is like, let's just have the information flow quickly. We work with the card manufacturers as well. We work with marketplaces as well in that area. And then the second one is we're really leaning in to see if we can help SGC with some of the scale that we have. So whether it's sourcing different suppliers for some of the materials like the holders or the inserts, PSA is operating at a different scale, and so we can get some cost savings potentially.
Huge news, of course, that PSA, or I should say Collectors, purchased SGC. So PSA SGC now under that Collectors Universe umbrella, and they are working together in certain areas. The first one, kind of the most obvious one, which I think is great, fraud and scammy type stuff, comparing notes, kind of like intelligence agencies, comparing notes with each other to identify who's submitting what are the typical scams that they're seeing, and how are they stopping them. So some security type stuff that they're working together on. But there was one big thing that Ryan slipped in here that I thought was really interesting. Mentioned is they can collab for sourcing supplies for holders and or labels to cut costs. So for cost savings, maybe they can, work together on this to cut costs for everybody. Now, what does that tell me? That tells me that kind of something that we've talked about, and other channels, other folks have been talking about as well, the possibility of maybe an SGC slab that looks more like a PSA slab. And I think that honestly, just for uniformity in the hobby, and I've talked to SGC directly about this as well. I love the Tux. I love the Tux slab, but I also think just from a hobby standpoint, it would be nice when you're carrying around your case if everything is about the same size. PSA and SGC are the largest sports card graders. It's not even close. They're 1 and 2, and there's not really a close third, not even really close. And so it would be nice to have them, in the cases to all be able to fit together. So it would not be a shock at all. What I really hope to see is the SGC case is the same size as the PSA case. Maybe it's exactly the same, but it's got the Tux label, and instead of kind of that PSA hologram, it's got the SGC hologram. And of course, they're operating independently. Ryan and Jeff talked about that as well. As I said, I don't think it makes any sense for PSA to just Turn SGC into Boca Raton, PSA of the South. South Beach PSA. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It'd be like putting Louis Vuitton on Gucci stuff. You know, you have two strong brands, keep the brands separate. It makes absolutely no sense to remove SGC. But don't be shocked to see an SGC holder that looks similar to a PSA holder. Like I said, I think that would be helpful, good for the hobby, just because the SGC holder, it's fine in my hand, but if you're a young person or something, it is pretty big compared to that PSA holder. Easy to stack if they're all kind of the same size, easy to put in your case, and I think that would be great. Talked about faster turnaround time. So PSA actually has improved their turnaround times fairly well, around 45 business days right now for bulk. The goal that Ryan mentioned here is less than 30 calendar days, not business days. So I think the goal there within PSA is that when you submit bulk, and of course, if it's a faster service, you'll get it faster. But for bulk, getting it right around 30 calendar days or less, that is the ultimate goal for them as far as turnaround times. This is kind of a big thing too. PSA will add photo matching. Photo matching.
We're adding a new service offering that we're going to be announcing in the coming weeks around photo matching. So PSA is going to get into the photo matching business as an optional service that you can add for items that are coming in for DNA authentication. So if you have an autographed jersey, we can attempt to photo match it as well.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Now, do you have the image libraries then?
Yes.
So you'll go through,
Yeah, we've hired an expert in the space. We've gotten access to all of the image libraries, or at least a lot of the large ones. And then it's really kind of a research journey to go through and see if you can match this thing up to a specific event or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great to know that you guys are going to offer that service.
Yeah, that's going to be really cool when we roll that out.
So they're going to get into that space where they're going to use the databases. They have got access to the large imaging databases. And for their PSA DNA service, they're going to photo match a jersey to a game and that sort of thing. So they're getting into the photo matching part of the business. Here's a big one. Here's one of the bigger ones that people are going to be very interested in: grader notes.
We're going to roll out a thing we're calling grader notes. So customers want to know, why did my card that I thought was a 10 get a 7? We are going to show this when you go to My Orders and you see your grades. You can click something and it will have a little pop-up that says surface, fingernail indent on back.
Wow. Okay.
We're going to roll this out at the higher service tiers because it does take more time. It'll be express and higher is what we're going to start with. But if it proves popular, we'd like to bring it and have it available at the other service levels.
That's huge.
We think it's a step in the right direction as far as just giving a little bit more transparency and education to the customers. If there's a big delta, if it's an ultra-modern card and you thought it was going to be a 9 or a 10,
they are rolling out grader notes. Ryan said it's going to first start on the higher service levels, but the goal is, again, to get it to every service level. And so essentially, you will know in the grader's notes why you got that particular grade. They made an example of a dent on the surface will be in the grader notes. And that's how you will be able to identify what happened, why did that card get a particular grade. Some people in the hobby don't care about graders notes, but there's been a lot of people over the years that have said, man, I wish that we had access to grader notes. I wish that we could figure out what's what. I also kind of wonder if the grader notes as well is for internally for PSA to easily better identify cards that they've already graded that are being cracked out and sent back in. I wonder. I'm kind of wondering. Which brings us to the next topic, card cleaning. They talked about card cleaning.
I want to ask you about card cleaning. Was there any discussion around this, or is this just a very black and white issue for PSA?
No, we talked about it. I think we talked about it for sure. But at the end of the day, I mean, really what my statement was is like, we don't know what any of these things do. So if somebody's putting car wax on the surface of their card, what happens to the surface of that card in 10 years? And it's in the PSA holder. And we said it was a PSA 10. And then all of a sudden, all these scratches start appearing. And then somebody comes back to us on the grade guarantee and says, hey, this is not a 10. I want my money. We're on the hook. There are older cards that people have done some like stain removal that I've seen some things shared out there where the stains come back. I don't know how long they stay away. But if those stains reappear, it's like, okay, PSA, you screwed up. So we have a big responsibility here to stand behind, what our assessment is on the product. And then the other nuance with my statement was, if we detect it, sometimes this stuff is hard to detect, but we're working on better ways to detect it. Obviously, some of these things leave a smell. Some of them leave a residue. There's other ways that we're also exploring on how to detect this using other methods.
It's obviously an issue. PSA has come out and made their statements about it. I've made my feelings well known on the channel about how I feel about soaking a card and all the, the fixing of all the surface stuff and whatever. I think it's completely bogus. I think it's actually a big threat to the overall hobby. I know that there's a lot of people that don't agree and whatever, and that's fine. We can agree to disagree. He did state that they are working on different ways to figure out, and I thought this was interesting. He said different ways to figure out if a card has been cleaned or altered, as PSA would call that, and outside of sight or smell, which I thought was interesting that he said sight or smell, which means that maybe they are looking at some sort of like being able to like tell from a scent if there's something on a card. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. My takeaway here is I would not underestimate the tech work that they're doing over there at PSA, as well as with SGC, as they're all kind of wrapped together, and they're going to share that information and that technology, I'm sure. But they're working on different methods to figure this stuff out. So I thought that was interesting, again, from the folks that will come out and say that they don't want to know about it, that business. They don't care about the liability, which, I mean, again, for me, a lot of this stuff is just common sense, but I know for a lot of people, it's not. So, and that's totally fine. Again, everyone's allowed to have their opinions. That's how the world turns. Talked about PSA Fanatics and partnerships. Expect to see more partnerships between Fanatics and PSA. They've got right now kind of that Fanatics Live partnership that they're doing. One thing I thought that was interesting, and Jeff brought this up as well, and I think it would help the data tools, is trying to get Topps to standardize their checklists to make it easier for PSA, for example, or SGC to identify, more easily identify, what that insert card is, as opposed to like trying to figure out the orange wave versus the orange cream versus the orange nectarine numbered out of 25. There's so many parallels now, it's getting more and more difficult. And of course, sometimes you get labels that are wrong and that sort of stuff. That also wreaks havoc on the data tools that are trying to, of course, map out comps. They're trying to figure out, trying to tell us what a card is worth. Well, sometimes it's not going to be able to differentiate between the orange wave and the orange nectarine prism if they were titled wrong. Of course, now PSA, eBay, collector, it's all wrapped into kind of that partnership. So this will be very interesting. I think if they can kind of streamline that checklist, that would really help with data accuracy, especially for the grading companies that are trying to figure out what is what. Additionally, there was talk about getting images from the manufacturer, from a Topps, for example, of a new card set to be able to identify fraud better. So being able to get that picture of that patch card, that RPA that's coming out, so that when it comes in for grading at some point, they can see, oh, wait a second, we can cross-reference it and say like, wait, that doesn't look right. Something's different. The patch is different, or the auto's different, or whatever. Something is off with it, and they're able to better identify and grade the card. And so it can be anti-fraud, anti-scam. They talked about tech-assisted grading, which of course you've got other companies that are out trying to do automated grading and that sort of thing. PSA is starting to kind of ramp this up. Ryan said they already do have kind of a separate screen for the graders. They already have kind of an automated centering tool, which essentially tells the grader what the ratios are. They can use that as part of their assessment. And now they can match individual grader performance. So they can look at what a grader is doing, what grades they're giving out, and figure out, based on the PSA standards, a particular grader being too loose, too conservative, too strict. They can figure out, okay, based on our standards, this is looking like it's a little bit off. And they can look at that individually, which I thought was really interesting. Who graded this card and what is kind of a theme that we're seeing? Is it too harsh? Is it not hard enough? And Ryan did say that sometimes with a new grader, they might be a little bit more conservative. They might be a little bit more tough. They have to be kind of trained up for consistency. And I do think actually that coming out of the pandemic, when PSA did do a lot of hiring and they were playing a lot of catch up, I remember too, just watching different videos, and it was like 100 card submission and I got 10 cards that were 10s. I do think that as they ramped up their grading team, that over the last, couple of years, going back 2 years, 18 months ago, 2 years, that they were tougher. Not because the PSA standard changed, but just because they had newer graders coming in, trying to get trained up. I do think, though, that they're starting to even out more, and I have noticed that as well. People more happy with, I got a good gem rate return on this one. Of course, there's going to be some where it just doesn't make sense. I got a 6, I don't know how I got a 6, that sort of thing. But I think overall that has evened out a little bit, especially over the last 6 months. So outside of that recent news that PSA is going to take over authentication from eBay, for those that might have missed that, it was CGC that was doing part of that as well as PSA. And now it's all going to be PSA that's doing that eBay authentication. There was already kind of talk of eBay and PSA working together. We already reported on the fact that PSA, eBay, Golden kind of all working together in partnership to where we do have it coming to where I believe that you're going to be able to buy a card on eBay, you're going to be able to click to grade it, and then you're going to be able to click to sell it, whether it be through Golden or eBay, or send it off to PSA, and then you can click to just automatically put it on eBay. All of that efficiency and functionality, it's coming. It's just a matter of time. It's just getting it all kind of working together. But it's pretty huge news all the way around. I mean, if you look at really Collectors Universe, I know they don't go by Collectors Universe anymore. It's just Collectors, but Collectors, the company, they have been doing some huge, huge moves here over the last 6, 9, 12 months with eBay deal with Golden, and then they purchased SGC. They have really positioned themselves well where Fanatics is kind of in an interesting place. Unless they buy collectors, I don't really see an amazing opportunity for Fanatics to get in on kind of all these other areas. I don't. I know people say like, oh, they could buy Beckett or they could buy, the CGC or whatever. I still don't see how that really puts a dent in kind of collectors solidifying the grading space. Again, once they purchase SGC, PSA and SGC grade the most sports cards and they have the best reputation of any of these companies that are out there. So they really kind of control that sports card grading space. They're getting into photo matching now. You got graders notes rolling out. They're getting faster with the turnaround time. SGC I saw is getting caught up on their turnaround time. They kind of slipped a little bit, but you've seen here recently, they've got it. They're coming back. And I've looked at their grading numbers, and their grading numbers are still very strong. So a lot going on here, some big announcements. What about these announcements excites you? Whether it be the graders notes or the photo matching or whatever we talked about, is there anything that sticks out to you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.